Let's listen to the Dharma talk on the 5 aggregates, passing the path to Buddhahood, where the head monk Thich Thang Thiện explains that Buddha taught that there is no metaphysical world. Metaphysics is the shadow of existence. When existence disappears, the shadow also disappears. People often lose the idea of heaven and fear that the sins they have committed will be pushed to hell. When they die, the loss and gain are gone. Heaven and hell disappear together. When he attained the fruit of Arhat, the Thang Thiện also firmly told Buddhists that there is no metaphysical world. Humans feel that there is a metaphysical world because the consciousness of thought is more active than the consciousness. Because some people have a consciousness of thought that is more active than the consciousness, they often live in illusion, live in dreams. Because they live in illusion, they are often careless. So they have more suffering. If a person practices to make consciousness stronger than the consciousness of thought, they will have less desire, less lust, and less fear. Now, to make their life less miserable and a person wants to be completely free from suffering, he must let go of all desires, material things, affections. Should be attached to the body and mind and regularly practice, leave desires, leave evil, increase good, progress to an unmoving mind and then enter the holy state, attain the 3 knowledges. Then master birth, aging, sickness, death, liberation, reincarnation. The brain that controls all human activities is called the brain. The elder explained clearly the Buddha's teachings that the brain is made up of 5 aggregates, including form, feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. The aggregate of form is tangible, visible, composed of the 4 elements: fire, earth, wind, water. The perception of form is called form consciousness, invisible. When the 6 senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, turn outward, contact, record things, scenes, it is called the 6 legs. The 6 legs from the outside send signals in. Form receives through the 6 senses and distinguishes. This distinction is called form consciousness. For the naked eye, the eye consciousness distinguishes shapes, colors, light and dark. For the naked ear, the ear consciousness distinguishes high and low sounds, loud and soft. For the naked nose, the nose consciousness distinguishes smells, 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 smells. For the naked tongue, the tongue consciousness distinguishes delicious, sweet, bitter, spicy flavors. For the naked body, when in contact, the body consciousness distinguishes hot and cold, painful, sharp, and smooth sensations. And for the naked mind, the mind consciousness distinguishes good and bad, good and evil. From there, the form consciousness transmits signals to the mind. The mind receives the signals and receives them according to habit and then transmits orders to the action to work. For example, if the mind wants to be beautiful, the action will accept them. If the mind dies and is ugly, the action will abandon them. The mind chooses based on habit and experience. Invisible, not seen but felt. Feelings receive signals of pain, sadness, joy, fear, longing. Infatuation, itching, tickling, hot and cold, rough and irritating. Send signals through the mind. The mind transmits orders to the action aggregate to work. Cannot see but can feel. When dreaming, fantasizing, seeing the wrong person, it is called imagination. Imagination transcends space and time. Imagination transmits orders through the mind for the aggregates to work in superstition, fear, ghosts, fantasy, sometimes coincidentally similar to real life. The aggregates of imagination have the nature of easily satisfying greed and flattery. Aggregate of action. Action is controlled by form, feeling and perception. Aggregate of action is like thunder, doing whatever is ordered. Aggregate of consciousness. Not consciousness. This part is not active. When someone cultivates and achieves the three knowledges, the aggregate of consciousness is awakened to teach and control the aggregate of consciousness to operate. The aggregate of consciousness will operate beyond space and time, called willingness. While mentioning the aggregate of perception, where is the intention? The intention is in the aggregate of consciousness. Consciousness is limited by space and time. There are two main parts, the branch of consciousness and the intellect. Branch of consciousness. Knowing without learning, learning from previous lives, drifting along with karma. The intellect, knowing only through learning, students, scholars, professionals. Where is the mind? The mind runs around in the head, like an untamed horse. Once the practitioner cultivates to control the mind is brought back to the branch of consciousness. From there, the mind obediently follows the instructions of the consciousness and enters the motionless mind. Once the mind is still, the practitioner's work is done, no longer returning back and forth. Consciousness has a tendency to be upward, to be good, but is weak by nature and is subdued by the consciousness of thought. Therefore, the practitioner needs to train his consciousness to be strong and brave in battle to overcome the pressure of the law on the body and mind. That is, to overcome the consciousness of thought. Only with a strong consciousness can the mind be controlled as desired. The practitioner who wants to have a peaceful life, to thank himself, needs to constantly train his consciousness to overcome the passions and temptations to enter the wrong law urged by the consciousness of thought. The important thing to remember is that when a person is just formed, the consciousness of thought is already active. Meanwhile, consciousness takes its first steps very slowly, even slower. When growing up and laziness increases, consciousness must surrender to the consciousness of thought, and people often live in superstition, often fearing for no reason. To overcome the consciousness of thought, the Buddha taught the consciousness to use the right intention, that is, the reins to train the mind to get used to good law. When the mind is familiar with good dharmas, the mind is freed from the influence of the thought consciousness. At the same time, the thought consciousness follows the mind. So the thought consciousness turns to be friendly with good dharmas. Consciousness is the central spirit, thanks to the thought consciousness turns to good dharmas. So when we fall into the close thought association, the thought consciousness helps us practice according to the dharma. The mind is the habitual knowing, but the mind does not discriminate, does not know how to choose, the mind only accepts the appropriate habit. When familiar with evil, the mind accepts bad. When familiar with good, the mind accepts good. This shows that the mind does not have consciousness. If the mind knows how to choose, then we do not need to practice, because when the mind is awake, the mind chooses good dharmas. We have attained the fruit. The thoughts that arise in the mind are called delusions. The thoughts that arise and wander in the mind are called chaotic thoughts. Thoughts are due to karma that has existed before and are trained into habits called mixed energy. Because thoughts are created by good and evil karma. Therefore, delusion is not due to the mind, not due to consciousness, not due to the thought consciousness. Therefore, do not restrain the mind to end delusion. Doing so is not right. If you restrain the mind to end delusion, you will fall into imagination. The thought consciousness is active and the sweet mind is stuck in the world of imagination. The Buddha taught that if you want to end delusion, you must use the method of avoiding and avoiding. Abandoning the mind, greed, anger, ignorance, life, doubt and love fetters, then delusion will end. Or in other words, abandon desire, abandon evil. Prevent and destroy evil and increase good. Once good grows, delusion will end. That is, the mind does not wander. A mind that does not wander is an unmoving mind, a mind that is focused on the body. A mind that is before the body is still, deeply concentrated and from the supernaturally appearing. Bhikkhus like purity and goodness. The Nam-Uan commentary, if studied and developed by teachers, students and university students, will help the progress of humanity. Because each person knows himself well, especially knows the activities of the mind. The mind is like a flatterer, always pushing us to indulge in greed.